So, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning on our first Agile and Scottish Local Government webinar. I'm Siobhan from the Digital Office, and today we are joined by Johnny Cormie from Angus Council, Judith Quinn from Fife Council, and Alex Rodwell from Orkney Islands Council. Today we will be exploring what Agile is and showcasing the use of Agile in Angus, Fife and Orkney. So the presentation will last approximately 40 minutes and then we'll have a 20-minute Q&A at the end. And the format of today will be an introduction from Johnny and then he'll pass over to Judith around sort of visualization and workflow with Agile, and then Alex will cover the hows and whats of Agile in Orkney. So the Q&A session will be at the end, so I would encourage you to use the questions tab throughout the webinar to ask any questions you may have, and they will be covered in the session at the end. So just a quick note that the webinar will be recorded today and this will be published on our YouTube channel to access at a later date, and would encourage you also to share with your colleagues. So that's just a few logistics, and if you've got any problems throughout the webinar, please do use the chat box function to let us know, and we will try and resolve any issues as quickly as possible. So without further ado, I will pass over to Johnny to get started.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Siobhan, for the intro there. So I've got the easy job. It falls on me just to do an introduction to this, and Judith and Alex have got the difficult job of giving you all the content here. So first of all, the presentation is clearly about Agile and Scottish local government, but in the true spirit of Agile, we've been through a few iterations of this presentation. So one of the first things that we realised was, well, we're talking about Agile, but perhaps some of the attendees might not know anything at all about Agile. They might know a little bit, they might know everything about it and be criticising us. So what I wanted to do, just as a basic intro, was say that this project came about because it's part of the L05 Digital Transformation Capabilities Project. Agile is clearly an important item for everyone. It's talked about a lot, it's discussed at all levels. And it's clearly a way that we can deliver real value to our customers. We did a lot of discovery work initially, in that despite everyone speaking about it, there was clearly gaps in people's knowledge. There was people who were kind of at the very early stages of Agile. There were some people who have got an entire governance based around Agile. NHS, NSS was one of those that have completely embedded it, have a huge corporate structure around Agile. And then you've got partners like ourselves at Angus Council, who are really just at the extremely early stages of pushing that out. So the outputs of this project so far have been case studies from Angus, Fife, Orkney Islands Council and Renfrewshire. And we've also produced an introductory leaflet which highlights key principles, methods, techniques, frameworks. And again, it's not an Agile training course. It's designed to be exactly what it says, an introductory leaflet for everyone to have a look at, pick up, and hopefully use it to share the knowledge of Agile throughout their own organisation. So in this webinar, what I'm going to do is, I've got the 5 key principles to talk to you about around what is Agile. I'll then pass over to Judith Quinn from Fife Council, who's going to talk about a beginner's guide to Agile and the tools and techniques that they've used, and some of the learning points that we've got. And then I'll pass over to Alex, who is going to talk about Agile and Orkney Islands Council. So they've got quite a mature implementation of Agile compared to Angus, for example. So that should be a couple of ends of the scale. But I think the content in Alex is particularly good from my point of view, in that it talks about the governance around Agile and how it fits into Prince 2. That's something that's come up for us all, in terms of, well, how do you get this embedded in an organisation that's already married to Prince 2? So what is Agile? The Agile is a method that lets us deliver requirements to our users throughout the entire life cycle of a project, rather than just at the end. And the idea is that it's focused completely on user needs. It's underpinned by five key principles, which are supported by a variety of tools and techniques. Some of these we'll speak about during the presentation, but I'll go through the key principles and just talk about some of the terminology that we might use. So the first one is the focus on user needs. This is something that comes up more and more in terms of service design and agile project delivery. But the idea is that we focus on user stories and collaboration and communication. The idea being that everything that we do is focused on the user. We don't deliver things that aren't needed. We don't gild the lily. We don't try to polish things that don't need polished. We deliver just core functionality. We also look to deliver iteratively. Now, iterative is a word that I've used more this year than I've ever used in my life, I think. It's all about releasing stuff when it's ready. So we can do sprints, which are short, focused pieces of work that focus on user requirements. So we deliver early value. The idea being that as soon as you've got something ready that's usable and tested, we can roll that out and get people using it. So instead of waiting till the end of a project to get some value out of it, people are able to get value early. Again, that's underpinned by the third principle, which is fail fast and learn quickly. The whole idea of a sprint is that you can fail fast. You decide what you're going to roll out, you try it, it might fail, but you failed quickly. You haven't taken 6 months, you haven't taken 12 months to fail. And that's underpinned by things like retrospective meetings where you look at how a sprint's gone. And it's also the place to share successes and share any learning that you've got. That in itself is supported by the fourth key principle, which is keep planning. Planning will come up a lot in the others' presentations, but it's all about planning. The idea being that you plan your workload so that you can produce the things we've talked about already. So you plan your sprints, you plan the products you're going to release, and that's supported by things like Kanban boards, product backlogs, and it's all just really to keep work on track and relevant. And lastly, we've got keep improving how the team works. That to me is the big one, which it's all about making sure that what you're delivering is right. So your team's working properly, your team's working together, your team's productive, and that any issues are brought up early and they're challenged in a kind of supportive environment. So in the others presentations, you'll hear about daily scrums, you'll hear about stand-ups, and you'll hear about the value of sharing that. So without further ado, I'll pass across to Judith, who's going to give you some content on what they've done in Fife Council to release Agile.
Hi everybody, my name is Judith Quinn and I am an improvement consultant at Fife Council, and I'm really just going to talk to you today about some of the tools that we used just to really kickstart our Agile journey. So why even change the way we worked at all? Well, back in around 2016, the way that we worked was quite problematic. At first we had quite a large team of about 16 and they all managed their individual workloads. We also had a multidisciplinary team, so we had a range of developers, we had analysts and we had content writers. And both these factors together, they kind of created natural silos within the team. We dealt with a lot of different workloads coming into the team. We dealt with large projects, we were delivering individual services online, we were supporting a raft of editors across the organisation, and we're also having to maintain a website platform at the same time. So we had lots of different things coming in from lots of different places and not necessarily into the right funnels. We also only had monthly meetings outside our general project meetings, so this made the communication in the team really poor. Many of the issues that we came up with were only getting discussed at the monthly meetings, so we weren't really addressing them as quickly as we could be. Finally, we were using Prince2, which is a really good project management tool, but it's not so good for delivering small bite-sized chunks of work, and there is a lot of paperwork to fill in. So when we put this all together, we didn't really have any oversight of what the work was the team was doing as a whole, and we weren't always doing the right things for the right reasons. So we decided that we really need to look at alternative ways of working in the team, and Agile seemed like a really good approach to us. Now, the Agile manifesto, it really appealed to us because it's flexible and it's about responding to change, which we really felt we needed. It was also driven by the customer and the end product, and making sure that what we delivered was of value, which was important to us. We also liked as well that it's quite light touch documentation, and it's about simple detailing of the customer need and the product attributes. And we also like the proper use of what's called acceptance testing, which meant that we were carrying out our testing with stakeholders to make sure that these products were developed in line with the needs of the users. Finally, a really biggie for us was the collaboration aspect of Agile. We wanted to make sure that we were sharing the ownership with whomever we were developing our products for, so that it wasn't just about us telling them what they were getting or how it should be used. We wanted to really have product owners or services shaping what the end product would be and testing alongside us, which was really where we wanted to be in the long run. So we set about implementing Agile in the team, and we tried to do it in its entirety. We tried to do proper scrums, we attempted sprint planning and looking at retrospective meetings. We looked at using burn-down charts, and we also were using service design at the time, and we tried to blend Agile with that. We basically tried to do the lot in a winner. So we soon failed, mainly because we didn't have any experience in the team of using Agile, and also we had no formal training. So at that point we could have just given up, but we decided to just go back to scratch and start again. So we picked up some basic tools from Agile, ones that we thought would be of value to the team, and we stuck them into the day-to-day running of the team. So the two tools that we used were the Scrum board, or in lean terms it would be your Kanban board, and also holding daily Scrum meetings. Now here you can see our actual Scrum board that we're using today, but I just want to take you back a couple of years to show you where we started. So here you can see this is an illustration of our Scrum board. We basically bought a whiteboard and we cleared the spacing of this, stuck it right in the middle of the team propped up against the wall, and then we started to create different stages on the board which combined together gave us our natural workflow in the team. Now here you can see the first column is the backlog, and in Agile that would be your sprint period where you would put up all your work for say a period of 2 to 3 weeks, could be a month, whatever you choose it to be, but it's usually quite a short period of time. However, we weren't really at that stage, so we used it for basically putting all new work coming into the team onto the backlog, and then we would discuss whether it was valid at our daily meetings. So next is the define column, and that for us was really our first stage of the doing process. And when we moved work onto this stage, that was basically us saying, yep, that's valid, we are going to do it. And during this stage, we would work with the services to scope out what work was required. So after we scoped it and we signed off with them, we'd move on to our work in progress stage, which was generally our build stage. And this actually fitted in and around the whole team's workload. So whether it was writing lines of code, or if it was building an application, or it was creating a range of content for the website, this really worked for everybody in the team. The next phase was our test phase, and we used that for our acceptance testing, which we always carried out with the services, and where possible we did that with our customers in Fife as well. And finally, we chose to have a live stage as well, and we kept work in here for a short period of time just so that we can actually see the work that we were achieving before then it was whipped off the board. So these stages really worked well for us for quite a long time, but as you can see, we added in the work in progress and done to each of the do stages, and that was really just to indicate when work was completed and ready to move on to the next stage, so it didn't sit there for any longer than it needed to. Now you can have whatever stages you want, but what I'd say is think about what work your team are doing and working around that. If you're maybe using lean or service design in your organisation, you might even want to put those stages into the board so it coincides with your approaches. Now there are loads and loads of online tools available as well, and you might want to use those if you've got very remote teams. We did start to use the virtual boards, but we ended up going back to a physical board, mainly because people just weren't updating their tasks. So do be aware if you're using an online version of the tool that you will have to keep prompting people to use it so that you have a robust system. So once we had the board on, we obviously started to put our work on it, and we just basically used post-its, nothing too fancy, just post-its. And this was just so that it was really easy to update them and move them through each of the stages. So centre stage was our task. We did really struggle to develop what was called epic stories and user stories in Agile terms. And at first we tended to put like huge tasks onto the board, so things like delivering a whole council tax account or delivering a whole area content for homeless. But quickly we did see that the tasks seemed to stall on the board for weeks at a time, so we started to refine them and put them into either products or components or specific functions that the product was going to perform, as you can see here with our council tax bill illustration. So as well as heading up the post-its with our deliverables, we also added in some estimates based on our own experience, so how long it was going to take to do. And we put the start date on and the end date as well. And this was great for us because we could track if our estimates were right or if we'd overestimated and learn why. And then this helped when we were putting more work onto the board. As a lead for the team as well, it also meant that I could track what we were doing in the turnaround, and I was able to feed back our achievements to other people in the team and outside at the end of the year. So putting on all our tasks on the board was really great for visualising who was doing what, and every post-it had a lead for the work and who was working on it, but also enabled us to see what capacity there was in the team as well, so we could pick up work from the backlog or the other stages on the board and move them through it more quickly. So on to our Scrum meetings. Now we chose to have our meetings every day. We had them round the board, standing up at the same time every morning, and they roughly took between 15 to 20 minutes. It'll take you a little bit of time to work around this to get it down to this time scale, but I would say that's a really good time to aim for in order to keep people engaged and enthused. When running through the board as well, we had 2 people who took turns to do it, and in Agile terms this would be your Scrum Masters. Now, I would say don't make that your manager. You don't want to have your manager running. Instead, I would encourage you to appoint people that are confident enough to stand up and lead and drive the meetings and to take on that role. You probably want people as well who are going to be able to guide the team effectively and stick as close to that time limit as possible. And also the Scrum Masters, you would want them to be able to challenge your team members about maybe why tasks aren't moving along the board, and also be able to capture barriers without really making individuals feel uncomfortable or as if they were being judged. So our meetings were really about capturing how people were progressing with their tasks and identifying potential blockers. And you'll be able to see right here, we've got a red dot on one of the tasks. Now we use these just to mark where blockers were, and we would work around the blockers on the board, moving tasks around them. One thing I'd have to say though is that having everybody around the board and having different people's perspectives and knowledge there at that one time, we usually managed to identify solutions to blockers before they even reached the board. So that was a positive benefit from that. What I liked about the meetings as well is that it created that open discussion, and it created a platform for generating ideas and these solutions to problems. It was really positive as well to see everybody in the team connecting and breaking down those silos that had initially caused us problems at the start. One big pointer I would say though is keep asking your staff about how you could improve the meetings or what could be changed. One key change we made based on that group feedback was the decision actually to move from every day to twice a week, to holding meetings twice a week. And by having that open floor discussion, we were able to quickly come to a consensus. So that is another bonus to having those group meetings. So the meetings did really help us keep on top of tasks and moving the work through the board quicker. And because everybody had a chance to speak as well, it meant that nobody felt left out, they felt included. So that's a little run through of the 2 tools we used, but what benefits did we see? So by creating a workflow and the ownership of tasks and tracking the work, it made it a lot easier for us to plan capacity in the team. And it made sure that everybody was comfortable with the workload that they had. By tracking the work as well, we could see our overall achievements. I think beforehand, we missed out a lot of work because people would just get on and do it and wouldn't necessarily be tracking it. So we were really able to see the extent of work that we had delivered over a period of time and share that with others. The way in which we communicated as a team as well really increased vastly, improved vastly. And it was great to see people with totally different skill sets, sharing ideas and helping each other solve problems. The collaborative aspect of the working as well with services was hugely beneficial, and we always had positive feedback about how we involved the services and how we took on board their expertise in our design, build and testing. So by improving the workflow and the communication and having that collaboration in place, we did create better products overall, and this is echoed by the services who actually really enjoyed working with us on projects. We also received really positive feedback from our customers as well, which for us at the end of the day is really what we were striving for. So I hope you've managed to pick up some tips on just how to get started with Agile, and I'll pass you across to Alex, who will explain it further.
Hello, I'm Alex Rodwell and I'm a Senior Project Officer at Orkney Islands Council, and I'm here today to talk about the hows and whats of Agile in Orkney. So what are the objectives for me for this quick session? Well, I hope by the end of this session you'll understand how Agile fits within Prince2 governance, understand Orkney Island Council's approach to Agile, and know where to start when it comes to implementing Agile within your organisation. So what will I cover? We'll start with the elephant in the room, which is Agile and Prince2. We'll go through an overview of our approach, and then we'll take a slightly deeper dive into three of the sort of core tools and techniques that we use. I'll talk briefly about using Agile within a program environment, as well as project, before finishing with looking at how you might go about implementing Agile yourself. Before I do that, I just want to very quickly go through some of the benefits for us of why we do this. For us, I found one of the great benefits is the focus and clarity that it brings to yourself and your team, especially in the short to medium term. That focus and clarity can really help with productivity and coordination within the team. Big thing for me is learning, and that comes into sprint retrospectives, which I will cover in detail later. And all of this reduces the pressure in the team, that balancing of workload, that focus and clarity, and that reduces pressure, an important thing in this day and age. So let's deal with the one that we get asked about a lot, which is Prince2 and Agile, and is this an or situation? I would say myself, I'm quite a fan of Prince2, and I find Agile works well within it. What it is a matter of understanding is where Prince2 works well and where you would bring Agile techniques into that. So looking at this diagram, you've got your governance, and especially in the public sector, that's something that we need. As you go through your life cycle, Prince2 very much talks of management by stages, and I find a lot of projects I'm involved in take a staged approach. And if we go into an actual stage, so a stage within a project, there are three core Prince2 processes. There's controlling the stage, so that's your project management. There's managing product deliveries, actually delivering the products or outputs of that stage. And there's managing a stage boundary, and that's where we transition from one stage into the next. I would argue that Agile techniques work most effectively at that managing product delivery area, and it's that area that we get the greatest benefit from them. So really, in summary there, I do think the Prince2 has its place. You still want your project plan, your stage plan, etc., but really Agile comes into its own when we talk about managing product delivery. So let's have a chat actually about Agile. Well, Two of the techniques you will likely have heard of are Scrum and Kanban. I'm not going to cover those today, but I'd strongly recommend you go to YouTube and look at these two videos. They're by somebody called Gary Strawn, and while he calls himself Development That Pays, I think the topics covered apply as much in non-development projects as they do in very IT-related ones. A couple of other points to note. Scrum is not a project management methodology. The Scrum Guide itself, right at the start, says Scrum is a framework for developing, delivering, and sustaining complex products. And I think that's where, taking that on board, the Agile techniques can work very well at that managing product delivery process within the Prince2 environment. Now, what was mentioned before was about being iterative and incremental, and those really are the two keywords that we need to keep in mind. And for that reason, Agile works well within an environment where there's significant uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I'm sure yourselves, like us, find that a lot of the projects we work in are within that kind of frame of reference. So let's talk about our approach. We use SCRUMBAN, so a mixture between Scrum and Kanban, because we can't do anything in a standard way. But let me talk through that. Taking on board Scrum, we use a 2-week sprint. So what is a sprint? It's just simply a time box. We use a 2-week time box where we plan what we're going to do, and we focus on delivery of those items within that time box. The sprint starts with sprint planning. So what we do is we take products from our product backlog. Now, what is that? That's just a list of outputs, deliverables, products that we need to produce. And we pick the ones that we want to work on and bring those into our sprint backlog, which is simply a list of things we want to do during the sprint. We tend to prioritize them. I'm quite a fan of Moscow prioritization: must have, should have, could have, won't have. And we then try to balance the workload by using planning poker. Now, I won't go into huge amounts of details on that, but again, if you go to YouTube and search for it, you will find various videos on it. But put simply, it's a group way of estimating the effort involved in producing certain products. We tend to use it for the balancing the sprint to make sure we're not trying to achieve too much, but it can be used for greater planning purposes. That's not something we've got to quite yet. When you watch the videos, they'll also talk about story points, and we don't use that. We're still using effort in terms of person days. How many person days of effort do we think something will take? So once we've balanced our sprint backlog, we put that on our Kanban board. Again, as Judith was saying, brilliant tool, really useful for visualizing our work. So once we've got that, we get on and we start working on delivering these products. As we go through the sprint, we do daily stand-up meetings, and that's something we do with the entire team. And that tends to be facilitated by the Scrum Master or Agile coach. And again, that's best led by someone who's experienced and confident in doing that and facilitates those meetings. We'll go into a bit more details on the daily stand-ups next. We then, at the end of the sprint, have a sprint meeting, and we combine the 3 core meetings within Scrum into a single one, but we break into the 3 sections. So sprint review: what have we delivered during the sprint? Sprint retrospective, which I'll come into a lot more detail of shortly. And then sprint planning: what do we want to do in the next sprint? And we've gone through that process that we follow. And out of the sprint, we hopefully have products ready to deliver to the customer, whatever that might be: a bit of code from some development, analysis, a report, an event. We tend to deliver those products to the customer as we go through the sprint, as they're ready, rather than waiting to the end of the sprint. And where we differ from Scrum, Scrum talks about, you set your sprint backlog, and that's what you do for the sprint. We find that a little inflexible. So what we do is, if new stuff comes in, well, we could park some of the things we were planning, and we'll bring those new items in. But with Kanban being a pull system, we try to make sure we finish one thing before we start another from the sprint backlog. So that's really an overview of what we do. And I want to jump into a few of the tools. So Kanban board, I cannot highlight and recommend these enough. I'm not going to go into details, that was brilliantly covered earlier, but this is the one we currently use. A great tool, not just for project teams, but for any small teams as a way of visualizing work and coordinating activities. The next is the daily stand-up. Now, the daily stand-up, when I first heard about them, I thought every day that's a lot of meetings. But we gave it a go, and I'm now an absolute convert to them. I think the benefits of them, even when done badly, outweigh any potential disbenefits or challenges. So how do you do a daily stand-up? Well, same time every day. Last no more than 15 minutes, and we find with our team of 4 people, it takes us about 8-9 minutes to do ours. You involve the whole team, and you stand up around the Kanban board, and then each team member answers 3 simple questions. What did I do yesterday? What am I planning to do today? And are there any impediments? It's then the Scrum Master's responsibility to help remove any impediments, and that might be through coaching team members or, again, the team self-managing and helping each other to overcome them. But the Scrum Master just needs to make sure that that happens. And it really is beneficial to stand up around your board. Although I will freely admit I had a slight revolution within my team, and after that revolt, yeah, we sit down for hours. Be strong. Try to get your team to stand up. So, on to the last thing on the tools is the sprint retrospective. This is one of the most underrated, I reckon, tool, undervalued tool within the Agile portfolio. And it really is about how do we improve what we do and how we approach work? How do we learn from what worked well and what could have been even better? So it's an opportunity for the team to create a plan for improvement. What you're focusing on with the retrospective is the approach to the work rather than the work itself. And for it to work, it has to be a safe space. People have to be able to give honest feedback and admit where they might have made a mistake or things didn't go well. So we have to reflect. Yes, we need to ask those difficult questions, but we're doing it without judgment. It's not about blame, it's about learning. So what do we do? Well, as a team, we discuss what went well during the sprint, what could have been even better if, and then, and this is the important part, is what will we commit to improving in the next sprint? And this is the action that helps improve what you do. And this can be in your start, stop, continue format. And you might want to go, oh, we want to try something new, there's something we were doing that didn't work, or actually we tried something once, but we want this to be part of what we do from now on. And if you put those small improvements, those incremental improvements into the way you work, and do that sprint after sprint, you'll find that you can, over a relatively short period of time, really improve how the team works and how you go about what you do. We've been doing this for a little while now, and if you look at where we were a year ago to where we are now, it's really night and day in terms of the effectiveness of our approach to what we do in an agile environment. If you're not convinced yet, I'd strongly recommend reading a book called Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. It's a really good book about learning. In fact, even if you are convinced, I strongly recommend you read it. It's an excellent book about that marginal gains and improvement from challenges. The next thing I want to cover is a bit about using Agile within a program environment or where you might have a portfolio of projects. We, in my team, have a large number of projects we're working on, but we find that Agile, the approach that I mentioned, works incredibly well. So what's the difference? Well, when you're doing your sprint planning, rather than taking from a single product backlog for that project, you're taking from a number of product backlogs for different projects and pulling that together into your sprint backlog. And really, apart from that, we follow the same process. So we find it works incredibly well, and I'd recommend, if you are working within a program environment or portfolio projects, give it a go, see if it can work for you. So when we talk about see if it will work for you, how might you look at implementing Agile within your team? Well, first thing to say is do what works for you. There are no Agile police. And I think taking again the Agile thing of being incremental, it starts small. Agile's not binary, it's not all or nothing. We can look at how much and how little we use depending on how relevant it is to what we do. So start small and add to it. Possible areas in terms of approach that I would look at is start with a Kanban board. Visualize your work, incredibly powerful tool for your team. Next, look at daily stand-up meetings. And again, very simple questions, no more than 15 minutes, and you will start to see that benefit on focus, coordination, working together within the team. I would then think about your sprint meetings, planning sprints. Sprints can be anything between 1 and 4 weeks. Try to keep them as short as possible is the general advice. We find a 2-week sprint works really well for us. Again, you have your sprint review, your sprint retrospective, and that's where you can start going, maybe we'll bring in another Agile technique. And that's what supports your development. And then your sprint planning. What are we going to do in the next sprint? So really, I think, give it a go. Find what works for your team. Fail fast and improve. So as a wise man once said, do it. So what did I say I was going to do? Our objectives, understand how Agile fits within Prince2 governance and that framework. And as I said, I think that's about managing product delivery. Understand our approach, which is very much that SCRUMBAN approach I went through, and where to start. Think about Kanban board first, then daily stand-ups, and then moving into looking at planning sprints. So that's everything from myself, and I'll pass back to Siobhan.
Thanks very much, Alex. Hope that wasn't all too much for everyone to take in. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A session. So did say at the beginning, if you could use the chat box to ask any questions that you may have. I do understand it may be a lot to take in at the moment, but yes, you use that, and if you've got anything else later on, then we will provide an email address that you can get in contact with us. I'll give a few minutes to type anything that they might want to ask. Just a couple of things to note, as mentioned earlier, we are recording this, so it will be available to view in the future and to share with your colleagues. Also, this is actually our second webinar for our Digital Transformation Capabilities project. We had a service design webinar with Stephen Kyle from Dundee City Council. I think that was September or October, can't quite remember. And we also have our first Open Innovation webinar next Thursday. And that will be with Colin Birchnell from the Digital Office and Glasgow City Council and Sally Kerr. So I have put the link in the chat box for you to register if you're interested in open innovation at all. And I'll also share some key links with you afterwards. So I've got a couple of questions coming in at the moment. So the first question we have is, good morning, can I ask what happens between sprints? So I'll pass that to Johnny, if you could answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to differ in between, and it depends on your backlog of work. In terms of us, what happens between sprints should be and is more planning. The idea is that you've got a kind of constant flow of work going through. I think Alex spoke about it in his presentation, that work is constantly coming in and you've always got to keep replanning. So it could be that actually in between the sprints, you're sacrificing a piece of work that you thought you were going to do next because something else has moved up the line. Alex, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, absolutely. It's about that continuing planning and your planning horizon. And the sprints are very good at setting what we think we're trying to achieve, and we start working on that. But as our priorities shift, we are able to go, okay, what are we going to move off to move something else in that's come as a higher priority? And this daily stand-ups can be a great way to feed that back, especially if you've as part of working on something, found actually this is a lot bigger than we anticipated, or there's a lot more to it. Again, as a team, you can reevaluate that and adjust during the sprint.
Great, thank you, Alex and Johnny. Next question for staff, have you got any tips for the creation of a safe space? Judith, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I think at first we tried to have our safe space in meeting rooms, but it became apparent that we were never going to get the same place at the same time. So we do work in a huge open plan office. And I think because you're basing the questions around what staff are doing really, and you're helping to remove any barriers, I think it just took a bit of a nurturing with the staff to be able to stand up in that open space and do that. And I think over time they did feel confident about doing that. But I know most of you will probably be the same. It's really hard the way that we work at the moment to have just that space aside from the team. So if you're lucky to get that, by all means use it. But really just, I think it's about encouraging your staff to stand up and be open in and around people. And that will happen over time.
Great, thanks Judith. Next one, how do you work with people who just want things now and they don't really care about your sprint and Kanban board goals? Johnny, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I can do. I think the big thing is that the whole idea of Agile is supposed to be collaborative. So you're always going to get that. You're always going to get resistance. You're always going to get folk that want stuff yesterday. But one of the kind of guiding principles of Agile is that you deliver iteratively. So we had a bit of a challenge in Angus with one user group, and it was hard to explain to them that no, you're not going to get everything yesterday, but what we can do is deliver certain aspects of it quickly. And I think it's just all about getting buy-in. If you get difficult clients or customers like that, the idea is that you deliver value early. You get the buy-in for sprints by actually having a successful one. I think you can talk about doing sprints, you can talk about delivering iteratively, but if you don't do it, you won't get the buy-in. So you have to deliver something early, get something in their hands, get something that can actually see, and then they'll start to see the value in it. That to me has been the key issue. There's always going to be a challenge to delivering it, especially in a traditional Prince 2 kind of environment where you plan everything to the nth degree, you list out your risk, you list out every possible connotation about every item, and at the end, you have a product to deliver. And I think people want that, they want dates. But what we've tried to do, and it has been a challenge, is that we say, well, this is when we're going to have a releasable product, something that could go out. It doesn't have to go out, but you get it in people's hands, you get them using something, and then you find that the feedback gets richer as well, because once they've got something in their hands, or they can see something, the feedback gets more valuable, so the next iteration has more value. Again, if the others want to chime in on that, they're more than welcome.
We've got another question here, which is pretty similar, and it's around getting the buy-in from senior management to use that Agile method. Alex, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes. We got buy-in by just doing it. And very much when we started doing it in one of our sister development teams, we just started doing it ourselves, and it worked well for us. And then it happened with other teams that again we just kind of get on with it. But we're doing that at a ground up level. We do, however, have senior members of our management team who are also trying to do it top down and introduce it as a concept that way. So we're interestingly going at it from both directions. While we have pockets using it heavily, it's not become culturally part of the entire organization yet, but is something that we're starting to get a bit of momentum on.
Great, thank you. Next question, Jude, I don't know if you want to pick this one up. I've seen several versions of the Kanban boards. Which is the right one to use?
I don't think there's really a right one. I was saying it's really about working it in and around how your workflow works. The way that Kanban boards can be set up, whether it's offline or online, are really around what your workflow is. So I think really defining that at the start, and again, as I was saying, looking at what work you do is probably the most important aspect of setting up your Kanban board.
There's a couple of people asking in here about training for Agile. I actually went on a 3-day Agile course last year, so I was very fresh into Agile, and it was very useful for me. That was 3 full days in Edinburgh, so I'll pass on those details because you can actually go along to that as a team and train as a team, which is very useful. So I'll pass out the details in the further information email afterwards. There's another question here. I like the idea of starting small and just trying it, but what if no other teams in the organisation are using Agile and you rely on other teams to make your project a success? I'll pass that over to Alex firstly. If you get any comment on that.
That's a very good question, and while we are using it as a team, and as I mentioned, we've got quite a portfolio of projects, not all of our stakeholders are working in an Agile method. So there are challenges around that, but I think the real benefit is how you organize yourself and your team around getting work, getting products produced and out the door. And that's what we do. It's about how we organize ourselves. And yes, we'll let people know we're working in an Agile manner, and those that are interested, we'll absolutely show them what we do. But I find the greatest benefits at the moment is for the individual team and how we work.
Perfect, thanks, Alex. There's actually another one for you as well. Alex briefly mentioned using Agile in an environment where team members are managing a wide range of activities across different programs and projects and controlling this via Kanban. How do you manage the involvement of larger groups of people involved in wider programs of work? A long question there for you.
And a very good question, and this is where I think Prince 2 comes in as a project management methodology. I'm very keen that each of our projects has a project plan with our method of approach, how many stages are going to be, and what are key products at each stage. So we involve the stakeholders, whomever they might be in the individual projects, in producing those project plans so they know what we're trying to achieve. And that gives us, at a high level, our product backlog for each stage of that project. And we work with them to understand what the products are, and then we filter that into our actual what are we going to be doing. So that's where your Prince 2 comes in, and having those documents, I would say.
Great, thank you. Apart from standing, what have colleagues most disliked about the change to Agile? Johnny, do you want to get that one?
Yeah, I think for us, the thing that they've most disliked is there's a feeling that it's bizarre because the whole idea of Agile is that you've got control and it's quite flexible. But I think given the fact that you have to keep a board up to date, you have to keep your tasks up to date, I think initially there's a perception that actually there's more control, because at times it can feel like micromanaging. I think in Jude's presentation, she alluded to the fact that actually they had to move away from a digital board and go to a physical one because it was difficult to get people to keep it up to date. Now we're still using a digital board, but you do have to press people a little to keep their tasks up to date. There's nothing worse than trying to manage so many different products and projects and seeing no updates and then asking people and discovering that no, they've been working away and they've been delivering loads, but there's no evidence of it. So I think for some people it can kind of feel like a bit of micromanagement, but in reality, once you get people going with it, it's a key benefit. You know, everyone can see the progress, everyone can see stuff moving through. So yeah, to answer the question directly, I think the thing that people find most challenging, or staff find most challenging, is that kind of level of accountability about all of your work.
And similar to that, there's sort of a question comment here about, like, during a scrum or a stand-up, how can you challenge someone who's running behind without causing them upset? And what can you say? So I suppose it's back to your comment about micromanaging, and how do you tackle that without maybe embarrassing or upsetting someone? Jude, have you got any comment on that?
Yeah, I think it's about not making about them work and what you can do to remove back to those barriers again. And I think as well, again, that open area discussion, people tend to chip in and they tend to come up with solutions to maybe help people along the way. But I think always bring it back and keep it to the task. So it isn't about them personally, it's about just getting the work through the board.
Great. Has any of you three tried daily Scrum meetings by using Skype? Johnny, do you want to start with that one? Because I know that your organisation uses Skype.
Yep, it is something we've tried and it is something we use, but for the actual daily stand-ups, I'll have to admit, the old-fashioned approach of being face-to-face, I think, works better initially. If you've got a really mature organisation and everyone's used to using Skype and used to using video conferencing rather than just the audio conferencing, I think it could work just as well. But my opinion is that if you're only using audio or you're using video and people aren't used to using it, I think it dilutes the process a little.
Jude, were you going to come in there as well?
I was going to just say, yeah, as again, back to people updating the boards as well, having that discussion over Skype, I think it would be quite hard. It might work, and after today, probably I would use Skype a wee bit more. But I think as much as you can, having everybody around the board and having a visual board is probably the best option if you can do that.
Perfect. Another one for you as well, Jude. I think, do you involve customers and all structural layers in daily stand-ups at all?
Yeah, currently at the moment we have a lot of projects that we're running with IT, so they come to our stand-up meetings, and as part of working with the services as well, we also include our stakeholders in our meetings, but they also work alongside us. So as much as possible, when we're working on tasks, they're in the office with us instead of sitting back in their own offices. So yeah, we do try to promote that.
Thank you. Alex, when you go live, is there any guidance documentation given to stakeholders for ongoing management and potential for further development discussion?
That's a very good question, and the Agile Manifesto talks about sort of delivery of code as over documentation as being valued. I still think there's a huge value to documentation and training, and in a modern era, thinking more creatively about that. You know, does it have to be documentation? Could be a video capture showing how to use it. So yes, we tend to hand over documentation as part of implementation, make sure there's training and such things. Again, this is slightly dependent on which particular project we're talking about, but I would argue, yes, that is part. But it is about, this is the current iteration, and it might change. We might improve. What's the next step to take it forward?
Great, thank you. I touched earlier on some training that I had experience of. Is there anything or any training courses that you guys have been on or would recommend, or sort of any documentation or books, etc., that you might recommend to the audience? Do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, there's a book called, I can't remember who it's by, it's called Stop Starting, Start Finishing, and it is really, really simple. It's a book about a project manager moving to using Kanban and Agile. So that's one that I would really highlight to use. We didn't do a lot of training. A lot of the information or guidance we found was just all online, and we worked it out ourselves. But I would say that probably if you can get training, do that, because it's kind of started us on the wrong foot.
Alex, you want to jump in?
I'll jump in there. I have had Scrum Master training, but that was after we actually started getting going with it, and we very much learned from Professor YouTube, and a lot of what I've picked up is from there. One thing I'd always say to people again is making it work for you. And if you go on training about Scrum, you'll learn about Scrum. And when you take it back to your organization, just make sure you do it in such a way that it works for you. Don't feel it's too prescriptive. It has to be done that particular way. If you're interested in it, that development that pays, there's a lot of very short but very good videos that Gary Strawn does. So I'd recommend there as a starting point.
And Johnny, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, in terms of starting point for us, we went on one of these team-based training sessions that you talked about. Ours was only a 2-day, so it's a very short intro, but it was a commercial course. The whole team went on it, and I think that helped us get going with it. We're definitely looking at further training, and obviously intrigued by the idea about the National Digital Learning Hub that was spoken about before. For those who haven't heard about it already, that proposal that we're going to have a kind of combined training resource, I think that'd be great, because at the moment we're kind of coming at it from all angles. You've already heard 2 or 3 different opinions of how people have kicked it off and what training they've had. I think having some kind of central repository of training would be great for everyone. Certainly my advice to anyone would be do it as a team if you can. I know it's difficult nowadays going on training or getting the funding to go on training or releasing even just the time to go on training, but doing it as a team certainly helped us because everyone's on it all at once. Everyone kind of buys in, everyone has a chance to kind of voice their concerns, and we're all kind of learning together, so it wasn't a kind of a them and us type thing where you'd sent a couple of heroes away on training who'd come back and were kind of forced to evangelize about it. My whole team did it as a oneer, which I think was helpful.
Great. One of the audience there was just mentioning the Scottish Digital Academy Agile course. That's the one that I went on, so I will share details about that after the webinar. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether I'm going to ask this question correctly, but one of the audience is asking, one of the presenters mentioned that the NHS have used extensively PDSA, which is Plan, Do, Study, Act, method of improvement for children's services. I wondered how to combine the 2 methods. Johnny, can I pass that to you? Would you be able to elaborate on that, or?
I can a little, yeah. I mean, I think as Alex spoke about, they're all kind of complementary methods. We're already talking about service design, and I think Agile is a means of delivering that. So you've got your Plan, Do, Study, Act methodology. Agile could be slipped in to any stage of that. Realistically, if you're actually doing Agile or actually using Agile methodology, you should be doing the same thing. So you should be looking at what you need to do. You should be thinking about a solution, designing it iteratively, and then looking back at what you've done. So to me, that would be a great thing to kind of complement each other. And don't think you necessarily need to replace everything you're doing. I mean, in Angus, we had a big push towards our own kind of version of Lean Six Sigma, and the two aren't independent. You know, they're complementary things. So I think you can fit the two of them together quite easily.
Thanks very much. Johnny, now I'm conscious of time. We're running slightly over. So I'm going to wrap up here. There is a few more questions which we will pick up directly via email. But just to wrap up, Johnny, would you be able to just sort of fill us in the next steps for the project and details if anyone wants sort of support or sort of further questions, who they can get in contact with?
Yeah, sure. The project's by no means finished. We're trying to deliver in an agile fashion, so we have been releasing things as we're able to. So this webinar itself is one of the outputs. The other outputs have been the pamphlet that we've got out and the case studies. So I'd urge everyone, if they haven't seen them already, to read those, and also just to get in touch. The most important thing is that anyone who wants to be involved is more than welcome, whether it's to join in and contribute, or whether it's to follow and to learn. The next output, I think, will be any news about the digital training hub, if that comes to fruition. I think that'll be a great kicking off point for people. In terms of direct things that you can do right now, I'd urge people to get in touch, and the contact details will go out with the webinar. So please feel free to get in touch and ask any questions.
Thanks very much. I've just popped up on the screen some information there about how to get in touch with us. And I would urge that if you're not already part of our Knowledge Hub, to join that. There's a lot of useful information on there, and a chance to sort of ask questions and collaborate with colleagues from the digital partnership. We have over 800 members on there, so there's lots of knowledge to be shared. And also we have an insight service as part of our digital leadership programme, which would link you with sort of like-minded people across the partnership that may be in the same line of work with you, or be able to help you with anything that you may need support on. So we're going to wrap up here. I would like to thank our three presenters, Jude, Johnny and Alex. There's been a lot of work going into today, so we would like to thank them very much, and we will share further information in an email afterwards, and also a link to our YouTube channel where this will be published, and would encourage you to share this with your colleagues as well. And there will also be information on future webinars and our service design webinar, which took place a couple of months back, which will be very useful for you also. So thanks everyone for attending, and we hope to see you on future webinars, and thanks again to our presenters.